This is the devastating story of Morgan Freeman's first marriage that Hollywood never wanted you to know. In 1961, at just 24 years old, Freeman married Jeanette Adair Bradshaw while struggling to survive in Hollywood and simultaneously trying to keep a marriage alive against impossible odds. But when success finally came after years of desperate struggle, this marriage became Freeman's greatest personal failure and most devastating heartbreak. This 12-year union didn't just destroy two people who had once loved each other deeply. It shattered children as well and left emotional scars that would never fully heal for anyone involved. This is the tragic story of a man forced to choose between his career dreams and his family responsibilities, and how that choice destroyed the people who loved him most. Morgan Freeman was working the graveyard shift as a janitor at the Wilshire Boulevard office building when he first saw Jeanette Adair Bradshaw in the autumn of 1960. She was exiting the elevator on the third floor at exactly 11:30 p.m., where she worked as a secretary for Mutual Insurance Company, a small firm that specialized in policies for working-class families who couldn't afford coverage from larger, more prestigious companies. Freeman was mopping the marble hallway floors, invisible in his gray janitor's uniform that smelled perpetually of industrial cleaning chemicals. But something about her graceful walk and the tired dignity in her posture made him pause mid-stroke with his mop, dirty water dripping as he watched her navigate the hallway with practiced efficiency. Jeanette was 23 years old, a single mother raising her 5-year-old daughter Dina completely alone after her first husband had abandoned them without warning, explanation, or any financial support whatsoever, disappearing one morning and leaving behind only unpaid bills and a note saying he wasn't ready for the responsibility of family life. She carried herself with the quiet strength and unshakable dignity of someone who had learned to survive through sheer determination and careful budgeting, working 10-hour days Monday through Friday and weekend typing jobs when available to pay for their tiny one-bedroom apartment in a rough East Los Angeles neighborhood where sirens wailed through the night, gang violence was common, and children learned early to avoid certain streets, strangers, and situations that could turn dangerous without warning. Freeman observed her evening routine for 3 weeks before working up the courage to speak, studying her habits with the careful attention of someone who understood that timing and approach mattered when reaching across the social barriers that separated a black janitor from a working woman who might reasonably be suspicious of unwanted male attention during vulnerable late-night hours. Every single night at precisely 11:30 p.m., she would emerge from the elevator carrying a small brown paper bag with carefully wrapped leftovers from her lunch that she was saving for Dina's breakfast the next morning, demonstrating the kind of forward-thinking resourcefulness that poverty demands from responsible parents. Her shoes were worn down at the heels, but carefully polished every morning. Her simple dresses showed signs of expert mending where seams had given way from too much wear and too many washings, and she carried an old leather purse that had been repaired multiple times with thread that didn't quite match the original color. She represented everything Freeman understood about maintaining dignity and self-respect, despite impossible financial circumstances that would have broken someone with less inner strength and determination. Their first real conversation happened on a particularly cold and rainy December night when Jeanette's umbrella collapsed as she left the building, its broken ribs and torn fabric offering no protection against the heavy downpour that had started during her overtime shift and showed no signs of stopping. Freeman was emptying trash cans by the building's main exit and watched through the glass doors as she struggled with the collapsed umbrella, rain soaking through her thin wool coat that had seen better days and offered little protection against Los Angeles winter weather that could be surprisingly harsh for people without adequate clothing or reliable transportation. "Ma'am," he said quietly, opening the door and speaking with the careful respect his grandmother had taught him to show all women, regardless of circumstances. "You can wait inside the lobby until this storm passes. I've got to clean these windows anyway, so you wouldn't be keeping me from my work." She looked at him properly for the first time. This tall, lean man with intelligent eyes that seemed older than his years and a gentle voice that spoke with the same careful dignity she recognized in herself and respected in others who had learned to navigate difficult circumstances without losing their humanity or basics, decency. "That's very kind of you to offer," she replied, her voice soft but clear, carrying traces of the southern accent that revealed her Memphis origins. "But my little girl is waiting for me at home with the babysitter, and Mrs. Rodriguez charges extra for every minute past midnight, which I honestly can't afford on my current salary." Freeman nodded with complete understanding, recognizing the familiar calculation of someone who had to weigh every decision against financial constraints that made simple choices complicated and expensive. "I get off work at 6 in the morning," he said, continuing to wipe down windows that didn't really need cleaning, just to have a reason for prolonging their conversation. "Been doing this janitor job for almost 3 years now, while I try to make it as an actor during the day. Most folks think I'm completely crazy for dreaming that big, especially given my background and the limited opportunities for someone who looks like me," Jeanette studied, his face in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the office building lobby, seeing something in his expression that went beyond the simple desperation of someone trying to make conversation with a woman during a chance encounter. "Dreams aren't crazy if you're willing to work hard for them and make the sacrifices necessary to achieve them," she said thoughtfully. "What kind of acting do you want to do? Theater, movies, television?" That question, asked with genuine interest and curiosity rather than polite dismissal or condescending amusement, was the beginning of everything meaningful between them, opening a door to possibilities neither had imagined when they were simply two people working late shifts in the same building, invisible to most of the world around them. Freeman found himself talking about Shakespeare and classical drama, about the community theater productions he'd been participating in for free while working multiple jobs to survive, about his deep belief that there had to be meaningful, complex roles for black actors beyond the limiting stereotypes that Hollywood seemed determined to perpetuate. He spoke about his vision of theater as a vehicle for social change and human understanding, roles that could challenge audiences rather than simply reinforcing their existing prejudices and assumptions about race, class, and human potential. Jeanette listened with the focused attention of someone who understood what it meant to hope for something better while working jobs that barely paid for basic survival, nodding with recognition when he described the careful balance required to maintain artistic ambitions while meeting daily responsibilities that couldn't be ignored or postponed. "I have dreams too," she admitted quietly, glancing around the empty lobby to make sure they were alone and wouldn't be overheard by building security guards who might report personal conversations during work hours. "I wanted to become a teacher before circumstances forced me into secretarial work," she continued, her voice carrying a note of wistfulness that revealed how much she had given up to provide stability for her daughter. "I completed 2 years of education courses at Memphis State before I got married and moved to California, but I had to drop out when Dina was born, and money became too tight for tuition and childcare expenses simultaneously." Freeman could hear the regret in her voice, recognizing the familiar pain of dreams deferred by practical necessities that demanded immediate attention and couldn't wait for better circumstances that might never arrive. "Maybe you could finish your degree once Dina gets older and more independent," he suggested gently. "Evening classes exist for working adults in exactly your situation." "Maybe," she replied with a sad smile. "But right now I'm focused on making sure Dina gets the education and opportunities I missed. I read to her every single night, books carefully chosen from the public library to expand her vocabulary and imagination beyond what our current circumstances might otherwise provide. I want her to have choices I never had, options that don't depend on finding a husband for financial security." Freeman admired her fierce dedication to her daughter's future and her refusal to let their present struggles define what was possible for the next generation, seeing in Jeanette the same determination that had sustained him through years of rejection and poverty in pursuit of goals that seemed impossible to achieve. They began meeting regularly during her evening breaks, sharing coffee from the building's vending machine that dispensed barely drinkable liquid that was nevertheless hot and caffeinated, and having conversations that revealed their shared understanding of struggle, ambition, and the delicate balance required to maintain hope in a city specifically designed to crush dreams and exploit desperation. Freeman started bringing books from his own carefully curated collection: plays by August Wilson and Lorraine Hansberry, poetry by Langston Hughes and Maya Angelou, novels by James Baldwin and Richard Wright, sharing them with both Jeanette and young Dina during his weekend visits to their apartment, which began as friendly social calls and gradually evolved into something deeper and more meaningful for all three of them. Dina surprised both adults with her quick understanding and thoughtful questions about the stories they read together, demonstrating an intelligence and curiosity that reinforced Jeanette's determination to provide her daughter with educational opportunities that would nurture and develop her obvious potential. Freeman discovered he had a natural affinity for fatherhood, reading to Dina with the same dramatic flair and emotional investment he brought to his acting auditions, making her laugh with silly character voices and improvised stories that built on the books they shared but added elements specifically designed to delight a precocious 5-year-old who was hungry for attention and intellectual stimulation. Dina, who had no clear memories of her biological father and had learned not to ask questions about his absence, began calling Freeman Daddy Morgan within just a few months of his regular presence in their lives, accepting him with the easy trust of a child who recognized genuine care and affection when she encountered it. The moment Freeman knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to marry Jeanette came during a particularly difficult week in early 1961 when Dina caught pneumonia and had to be hospitalized for 5 days, creating a crisis that tested all their resources and revealed the depth of their commitment to each other as an emerging family unit. Jeanette couldn't afford to miss work for extended periods without risking termination from her job, but she also couldn't bear the thought of leaving her seriously ill daughter alone in the hospital during the most frightening medical crisis of Dina's young life. Freeman immediately volunteered to sit with Dina during all his off hours, reading to her from library books he checked out specifically for her entertainment, singing quiet songs when her fever spiked and breathing became labored, and keeping her company through the long, frightening nights when hospital noises and medical procedures made sleep impossible for a scared 5-year-old who didn't understand why she felt so terrible. When Jeanette arrived at the hospital after her work shift on the 3rd day, exhausted from worry and the strain of trying to maintain professional performance while her heart was breaking with concern, she found Freeman asleep in the uncomfortable bedside chair, still holding Dina's small hand, while she slept peacefully for the first time since her admission to the pediatric ward. The nurses told Jeanette that Freeman had been there for 18 straight hours, refusing to leave even when hospital rules technically prohibited non-family members from staying overnight, charming the medical staff with his gentle manner and obvious devotion to Dina's welfare. "He's been singing to her," one elderly nurse explained with genuine admiration. "Old spirituals and folk songs that seem to calm her immediately when she gets agitated or scared. She stops crying the moment she hears his voice. In 30 years of pediatric nursing, I've never seen anything quite like the bond between those two." That night, after Dina's fever finally broke and the doctor assured them she was out of danger, Jeanette and Freeman sat in the hospital cafeteria drinking bitter coffee from paper cups and acknowledging what had become obvious to both of them during the crisis that had tested their relationship and revealed its true depth and meaning. "I can't ever repay you for what you've done this week," Jeanette said quietly, her voice thick with exhaustion and emotion. "Morgan, you've been more devoted to Dina than her biological father ever was, even when she was healthy and easy to care for." "You don't need to repay me for anything," Freeman replied, reaching across the small table to take her hands in his. "This is what families do for each other. We show up during the hard times and we take care of the people we love, no matter how difficult or inconvenient it might be." "Are we a family?" she asked, the question hanging in the air between them, with all its implications and possibilities. "I'd like us to be," Freeman answered honestly. "Jeanette, I've been alone most of my life, moving between relatives who saw me as a burden, never really belonging anywhere or feeling wanted by anyone. I never knew how much I wanted to belong somewhere, to be needed and loved, unconditionally, until I met you and Dina." The marriage proposal happened 2 weeks later, not with a romantic dinner at an expensive restaurant they couldn't afford, or an elaborate gesture involving flowers and jewelry that would have strained their budgets, but during their usual late-night conversation in the office building lobby where they had first discovered their compatibility and shared values. Freeman had been carrying his grandmother's simple gold ring in his pocket for days, working up the courage to take the step that would transform their informal family arrangement into a legal commitment with all its responsibilities and promises. "Jeanette," Freeman said, setting down his coffee cup and reaching for her work-worn hands with a tenderness that made her heart skip, I don't have much to offer you right now except my absolute promise to work as hard as humanly possible to give you and Dina the life you both deserve. Not just financial security, but love, stability, and a father who will never abandon his responsibilities or disappoint his family." Jeanette looked into the eyes of this remarkable man who had become essential to their daily happiness and emotional security, seeing the vulnerability and hope that he usually kept hidden behind his dignified exterior. "Morgan, I've watched how you are with Dina, how patient and creative and devoted you've been during her illness and recovery. I've seen how you treat me with respect and kindness even when you're exhausted from working 2 jobs and chasing your dreams. You're already giving us what we need most, someone who shows up consistently and loves us without conditions or expectations beyond what we can honestly provide." The wedding ceremony took place on a beautiful Saturday morning in June 1961 at First Methodist Church on Spring Street, where Jeanette had been attending services since arriving in Los Angeles and where the congregation had watched her struggle as a single mother and welcomed Freeman into their community with genuine warmth when he began accompanying his family to Sunday worship. Freeman officially adopted Dina that same week through legal proceedings that were more complicated and expensive than they had anticipated, giving her his last name and the legal security she had never had before, making their bond official in ways that went beyond emotional attachment to include inheritance rights and parental authority that would protect her if anything happened to Jeanette. The wedding reception was held in the church basement, with food lovingly prepared by congregation members who had watched Jeanette work 2 jobs to support her daughter and were genuinely happy to see her find a partner who clearly adored both mother and child. Freeman's small circle of friends from the theater community attended, along with some of Jeanette's co-workers who had heard her talk about the kind, ambitious man who was courting her with such patience and old-fashioned devotion that impressed everyone who witnessed their relationship develop. The early years of marriage were defined by shared poverty that required creative budgeting and constant sacrifice, but also by shared purpose and the deep satisfaction that came from building something meaningful together against difficult odds. They moved into a larger apartment, still small and in a rough neighborhood, but with 2 bedrooms, so Dina could have her own space and some privacy as she grew older and needed room for homework, friends, and the normal developmental activities that required physical and emotional boundaries between parents and children. Freeman continued working nights as a janitor while auditioning during the day for acting roles that remained frustratingly elusive, often going 36 hours without sleep when promising opportunities arose that conflicted with his work schedule. Jeanette maintained her secretarial position and took on additional weekend work typing graduate student dissertations and legal documents to earn extra money for Dina's school supplies, clothing, and the occasional treat that made their daughter feel less deprived compared to classmates whose families had more resources and opportunities. Their social life revolved around free activities that built family bonds without straining their budget. Elaborate picnics in Griffith Park with homemade sandwiches and games that cost nothing but imagination. Saturday afternoon matinee movies when theaters offered discount prices for families, and long evenings at the Central Library where Freeman researched acting techniques while Jeanette and Dina worked on homework together and discovered new books that expanded their understanding of the world beyond their immediate circumstances.